and welcome back to our One Wild and Precious Lives and Our Dogs. Today, we want to talk about a topic that originally Peter and I wanted to use in our introductory episode, but then we realized that the topic was just way too big and it just needed its very own episode. And that topic was greeting dogs or touching dogs in general, dogs that are not your own dog, but someone else's dog. And so after deciding that this wouldn't be part of our introductory episode, I just saw a post that Sue Alexander had shared. She shared a post by a German Shepherd breeder who mentioned that if you wanted a human social dog, you should get a golden retriever instead of a German Shepherd. And I agreed and shared that post as well, but I added that not all golden retrievers are sociable either. It's a good idea to consider the breed or the mix before you're getting the dog, depending on your circumstances. But once you've got the dog, you should consider the individual in front of you because, you know, they may be a golden retriever, but they may not be very sociable. It happens. Breeds are only tendencies, but we also only and always work with individuals. When I reshared that post and added my own thoughts, one of the people who commented on it was Amy Miller, a dear friend and FDSA colleague who lives with, I think, 5. Is that right, Amy?
That's
5
right.
dogs?
We have 5 dogs now.
Yeah, in Ohio. Amy agreed with my post, and then she mentioned that her Beagle Spaniel mix Marley doesn't like to be petted by strangers without an introduction either. And that made me think that Amy would make a great guest for this conversation on greeting dogs. She could help us dispel the myth that all dogs want to be touched by all people at all times. Before we get started, I just want to give Amy a chance to briefly introduce herself and her human and canine family, or whatever else she wants our listener to know about. Amy, tell us a little bit about you, your dogs, your family, your life.
Hi, everybody. I am relatively new to the dog world. I started in horses. We had a boarding and training barn in South Carolina for many years. And once I retired from that avenue, I needed something to do. I did not mean to get a dog that had lots of big feelings and needed special attention, but that's what I got. Marley came home and at about 11 weeks, he was lunging and barking at other dogs and was having a really hard time calming down from those moments. I, of course, signed up for a basic obedience class because I thought that's exactly what he needed, obedience. Not understanding at that point that it was a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
We did not do great in our obedience and ended up getting some help and landing in a good spot, but we can talk about that later. But the other dogs that we have are rescue dogs, and we've just gotten our first purchased for sports dog this last year.
Mm-hmm.
We love our rescue dogs. We have 4, but for one reason or another, they're not super suitable for the fun things that I've learned that you can do with your dogs. So
yeah,
I have 2 homebodies that have no desire to do anything other than lay out on the hill, and a lab that likes to do things, but structurally has some issues that will prevent him from being super competitive in sports, and Mr. Marley, who has a few emotional and behavioral issues.
Was Marley your first dog of the 5 that you have now?
Not my first dog. We've had dogs growing up. We've had farms. We've had farm dogs. We actually spent quite a bit of time in rescue. Our adult child now, for their senior project, did a foster program. So we fostered over 200 dogs in 1 year. So we've had lots of dogs go through the house, but they were there temporarily. They were there for their vetting. We had lots of different personalities go through, but I knew nothing about training at that time. We were just basically a foster home, a place for these dogs to land until they had their vetting and went off to other rescues. Yeah, that was a pretty big senior project for our kid.
Wow, that's crazy. That's so many dogs.
It was a lot of dogs through the year. So We have a photo book with all of their pictures in it, and it's really fun to see all of the different breeds and personalities that came through our house that year.
Also, best senior project ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
wish
of course
someone had let me have that kind of senior project.
Of course, it lasted because, 3 of our dogs are still from that.
Yeah.
From that time. They were dogs that were not really suitable to be adopted into a regular home. So they ended up staying with us. We're not a regular home. I don't know what we are, but we have a few misfits, but we love them all. Yeah.
I guess that tends to happen. I feel like La Enana, Peter.
Yes, she came from a Mexican shelter. She was returned 3 times, and then the girl who was working there, who's from the lake here, brought her down, and then she required more attention, and she ended up here. We constantly say, how did she end up in the middle of the bed? from all the way from a Mexican shelter to in the middle of the bed. She shouldn't be allowed, but she's the queen, and the rules are made for her, or she makes the rules, more to the point. You never
That's
know.
how it is here.
That's it. You never know which dogs are going to affect you or, connect with you. You never know.
Yeah. Isn't that the story?
And she does not like to be greeted when we take her out. She loves to be held anyway. So when she goes out, really, when we're passing other dogs, she wants to be up in the arms. And to be honest, that solves our problem. It solves all the problems, really. And when we get down to a safe part of the beach, we will let her off. But she doesn't like to go further than 2 or 3 meters away anyway. She's a real clingy. So that's absolutely fine.
I wish Marley had that trait.
Is that right? He wants to go.
He's got the beagle nose, so it hits the ground, and there he goes. So
everything else is forgotten.
And then he looks up and he's like, "Oh gosh, strangers!" So.
Well, yeah. Our joke whenever people want to meet her is, is she friendly? Because she just looks so cute, and just got to be hand straight in. And our joke is, she's very friendly with us. If she likes you, she's very friendly, but we don't know. We take it slowly and from a distance, please.
Yeah, that's an excellent strategy, and also a really good starting point. Because the way I thought we structured today's episode, mostly because to make editing easier for me, is to tell stories from our 3 different angles. We'll have Peter as the dog walker, dog sitter, dog boarder, dog entertainment center angle.
The McGarry Mendez, Camp McGarry Mendez, it's called.
And then we'll have Amy as the owner and what her experience has been with Marley. And finally, I'll go and provide the dog trainer angle. So what do I do when a client comes to me with a dog who doesn't want to be touched and the owner struggles with that? Peter, would you like to start us off? I mean, I imagine you constantly meet new dogs, and then you need to establish a relationship quickly, right? So what's your favorite method to greet a new client dog, and what have you learned since you started working with dogs professionally?
What I've learned is to let the dog, as much as possible, do the introducing. Try to not be proactive in hello. I concentrate on the owner at the start anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a little bit like cats. If you ignore them a wee bit, they tend to show a wee bit of interest. But I don't go over the top in meeting them. That'd be one thing. From my real point of view, meeting dogs, it's meeting other dogs and other people with my dogs that aren't really my dogs, the dogs that I'm walking, because we're just constantly meeting street dogs, constantly meeting other dogs on leash. And at the lake itself, it's constantly meeting people, and just to keep them as close to me as possible at all times. My dog's close to me, and I haven't had any problems with my dogs down at the lake, but I think just keeping them close to me, that's the most important thing, and letting people know. I let people know very, very early on in the conversation, these aren't my dogs. I'm walking these dogs for other people. And I think people like that because they know that maybe you don't know the dog as well, and people are a little bit more respectful or sort of cautious that this is a new dog. But keep moving as well. That's my big thing. If we meet, it wouldn't be so much people we don't want, but other dogs we don't want. We want to keep moving and keep under control. Because if my dogs are under control, then the other dogs are less likely to get amped up. And with people around, amped up is what we don't want. We want tranquilo days. So keeping it as calm as possible, that's my thing, and keeping everybody close to me. And I don't know, talking to dogs like they're people. That's what I tend to do, greet them from a distance. And on my routes, you tend to get to know the dogs, and the dogs tend to get to know you as well. So you know who to avoid. I do bring my little homemade pepper spray out with me, but I haven't had to use it in a couple of weeks. Really, my 2 areas where I had to use it, I used it 2 days, and the dogs aren't there anymore, or they haven't come back to me. So that's a win-win. The pepper spray is packed away. It doesn't have to be in my hand walking around the corner. But that's great for me. I've actually seen the dogs in question, but from a distance. And they've had a certain type of introduction, and they didn't enjoy it. And from now on, I hope I don't have to use it. So you didn't.
So they didn't leave Panajachel after meeting your pepper spray.
They didn't know. I haven't gone past the pit bull. I did have to give a wee squirt to since I've been talking to you, and he didn't enjoy it either. And the same thing happened when the next time we came past. He stayed on his side of the road. There's no problem if you're on your side of the road. I don't go looking for problems, you know. Yeah. But if there's gonna be problem areas, you have to deal with them, you know.
Yeah.
But for me, introductions are about staying under control, and if from a distance it doesn't look like things are going to go good, reverse and get out of there. With people, I haven't had any issues, but it is interesting. Up until recently, I thought the hand into the face, smell my fingers, was the way to introduce yourself to a dog, and I didn't. It was only really in the last year that I realized that is not really what a dog's language, body language is about. Sticking your fingers in their nose is not what I do. And it's good to educate people on that as well. It's not, this dog is friendly, but it's not a good idea to put your hand behind the head of any dog, if you don't know them.
How did you learn that this is maybe not the best way of greeting a new dog?
It was a Facebook post. It was a YouTube. It was a YouTube video on a post, or it was on Reddit. Maybe it was on one of the doggy pages on Reddit, but it was definitely a social media post that was just dealt with. And I had it just made sense to me when I read it. Yeah. Why a dog doesn't know what you're doing when you put your fingers up to its nose. You could be flipping it off for all the dog knows, and they could react in the same way. And getting down low as well. I won't get down low when I'm walking my dogs because you're off balance. But if I'm by myself and I'm meeting a new dog, I will get down to their level, which is easy. Which is easy, figuratively and literally.
For some of us, it's not so easy for some of us.
But I found it interesting. That was the first sort of psychology thing I sort of thought about with dogs, about and then you mentioned about primates being much more with their hands talking, and of course, but it's not a doggy trait to express themselves with their hands.
Yeah. And it's such a pervasive cultural myth. I feel like I've encountered that all over the place.
All over the world.
Yeah, I feel like it really is a human thing. It's not a cultural thing that is confined to a specific country where you learn that. It is what people who love dogs and have had dogs all their lives teach their kids when it comes to introducing themselves to dogs. It's really interesting to me. Yeah.
I didn't know any better either.
Yeah, you've seen it in movies, you see it on TV, and then and then you see it in the park, and then you see it, and monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah, and it's a self-perpetuating myth. Yeah, it's funny.
Exactly.
Yeah. One other thing I'm curious in your profession, Peter, is, so let's say, because you also have house guests, right? So
Yes,
let's
we do.
say a dog who you don't know, or who Elvira, your girlfriend, doesn't know, comes to your house for the first time, and they're gonna be dropped off and they're gonna stay there. How do you manage that introduction, like on the human level, not the dog introduction, but how do you greet that dog, or how does Elvira get to know that dog? Do
What
you have a specific protocol for this, or how do you work with that?
Well, we're lucky in our house. Our front door opens onto a little sort of first garden that has a second gate. And then there's a very large couple of different gardens. So if Elvira hasn't met the dog at all, in a town like this, most of the dogs that we have boarded, she has come across just from being out and about and seeing them at the lake and stuff. But if she hasn't met them at all, we would just have our other dogs in the house or in the garden and bring in the dog through that first. So there's a little secure area. And then it's, head over the first gate and just see how they are. We've been very lucky with our first dog. Leo was just very, very good with other dogs, and our current dogs are very good with other dogs, that we have never had any issue other than the dog coming in, them saying hello, and then once we've seen that there's no issues, we open the gate and they run out into the garden. But we're lucky we have that little quarantine area, I suppose you would call it. That would be what we use. And with having sort of different sizes gardens, and our house is an open house, we don't lock the door at night even, so the dogs can come in and out. Not a great thing to advertise, I suppose, on a public podcast, but the dogs can go in.
I'm all for it.
So it's a very relaxed atmosphere for dogs. We've never had a dog that wasn't happy to come in through those first gates, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And they've all been so far happy to meet your dogs, and also Elvira, for example.
Absolutely.
So yeah. No shyness towards new people or unfamiliar dogs.
No, the dog that we have today, who's going home later today, Shayla, she has definitely changed. This is her third time with us, and she's been with us for 10 days, and she's very much more, it's lovely to see, more relaxed, more assertive, more
nice.
Equal, definitely on an equal footing, more an equal footing with Cleo now. The first time she was here, she was down in the garden, and she was the little forest princess. We sort of nicknamed her our hippie princess, because she just hung out in the deep grass and in the flowers. And I suppose we should have maybe realized that she was shy, nervous at that stage. But because she had her own space and it was the best thing for her, she was happy those days as well. But you can definitely tell the difference in her now. And then the other two dogs that we have, the Inanna and Cleo, they were guests who turned into permanent residents. So but we had a special connection with them, and just with circumstance as well. One of them was a foster dog who had been looking for a forever home. So when you have a dog in 2 spells of 2 weeks, you can make a connection very, very quick. And my girlfriend certainly did with Cleo. But we've been lucky we haven't had any issues. Inanna has given permission for all of the guests. She has the upstairs, and we don't really allow our boarders to go upstairs on the wood floor. So she can look down from the second level and give her permission for the guests or not. And nice. So far she's been happy with everybody.
That is very generous of her.
Long may it continue. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you're giving her, like, that you're listening to her too, because it's her house as well. So
that's it.
She's got a say in it. Yeah,
that's it. And she's definitely getting better with the cats. I have to report another week that she has got better with the cats. We're moving her closer, and it's less growly. So we're making progress with the cats, but I think it's baby steps is all we can expect.
Yeah, and baby steps is the way to go.
Exactly. And I think we can understand that the cats are bigger than she is. So I can understand that she's wary of them, but she won't allow them inside the house, which is the problem.
Well, let her set the pace and you'll get there.
We'll get there. We will get there when we pet, or we will make them leave the house.
Yeah.
This is the second option. We can have a cat-free house, but we could definitely cut that out.
Well, now let's change gears. Amy, as the owner of a dog who, well, may not be as ready to engage with Peter, for example. Let's say you needed to travel and you needed to board Marley, or you're just walking Marley and you're encountering random strangers or acquaintances of yours who Marley has previously met and who think that gives them permission to pet him or hug him. How do you navigate these encounters, and what has your experience been of living with him? And also, of course, do you have tips for owners who might have a dog who feels similarly about people and about being touched as Marley does?
So initially with Marley, I didn't have any tools and I had no knowledge about how to handle him.
How old is he?
He's 5 now. Mm-hmm. And we did get him he was adopted as a young puppy, 11 weeks. Mm-hmm. He had parvo and Ben abandoned at the shelter or at the vet's clinic. They didn't pick him up after his treatment. And so he actually had 3 bites with people before he was 1.5 years. And I just didn't know how to handle him. I didn't know what to do. Granted, some of them were not his fault. Somebody reached in the 4-inch car window. The window was down 4 inches and somebody reached in the car window to pet him.
From the outside? From the
outside. That was his first. That was his first instant. And I said, well, that's understandable.
Right. And I would bite too if you reached into my car window.
Right.
You get the pass for that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then somebody reached into his crate and he bit them then. And I was like, well, I shouldn't have had the crate there. I should have protected him better.
Yeah, but still, I mean, in the end, that's how you feel like you're setting the dog up for success, because you don't expect people to reach into the crate. Yeah,
right. And this was in our house. So we weren't even out in a public place. It was in our house, and it was a guest that was over. And then the third time, someone had come home from work with my husband and walked in the door behind him, and I didn't know they were coming. And it was a surprise. Marley went running to see, Daddy, and oh, yay. And then there was a stranger all of a sudden reaching for him. And so he bit him. So he has reasons, but still.
Yeah.
And after that third time, I was like, okay, I need to learn to do something. We've got an issue because he can't just be biting people that comes in the house.
Right.
Luckily, fell into the trainer in West Virginia was Dr. Jennifer Summerfield. She was my vet.
Nice.
And ended up was my trainer, and she is also an FTSA instructor.
She's
so
awesome.
I fell into a very soft place, the perfect place to help me with Marley.
Yeah.
And I have a routine now, and for 3.5 years, he has successfully done barn hunt competitions, and he's doing nose work, and he doesn't compete in agility yet, but he has done lots of agility stuff.
Nice.
But we have a routine. Any introductions, whether we're in the house or away from home, he's on leash, comes to my side. We make sure he has a brain by doing a couple of really simple behaviors that he knows: nose touch, spin, turn, back. He has to be able to do those behaviors before I'll tell him to go see. And then still on leash, he goes and sees, but I tell whoever he's meeting not to reach out, just to sit there and let him sniff.
What does the go see behavior look like?
He runs over, sniffs them, and then I call him back right away and make sure he still has a brain. And if I let him, he would put paws up on them. I do have them sit so they're not in a standing position.
Good.
And he would put paws up on them. He's a little rude with his sniffing. He would like to sniff everything all at once,
the
and then I call him back. Yes, that's the beagle. And we do one more behavior. And generally by that point, he has a wiggly body. When the person first comes around, he usually is barky and stiff tail.
Mm-hmm.
But usually by that time he has a wiggly body, and I tell him to go sniff again, and they're allowed to pet him under his chin, on his chest, on his butt. From that point on, they are best friends until the next meeting. So we do the meetings pretty much every time. Now, when my kid comes home, she's known Marley his whole life and is here regularly, so she doesn't have to do an intro. They have lived with him for years.
Yeah.
But that does not carry over to people that he loves that he hasn't seen in a while.
Yeah.
He has to still do an intro. And we found that out last week when our foster daughter came to visit. And even though Marley was a puppy and was raised with her, she had not seen him in about a year and a half. And I let the introduction protocol slide, and she reached over the gate, let him sniff her hands. And he sniffed her, and then he bit her, and broke the skin. It wasn't a warning. He bit her. So lesson to me that the protocol has to be in place all the time.
Yeah, man, that sounds really hard. So Marty, your kid is the only one who can not be home or not be at your house for a while and then come back and not need the protocol, or are you gonna?
As far as I know,
protocol with them too is going forward.
I don't. No, I mean, unless they're away for a very long time, they would be fine.
Yeah.
They also understand that he doesn't like to be reached over. So Marty would not have done that, and it was my bad to not remind Amy, the foster daughter, that was the case. But for the most part, the routine of introductions is just part of our day. He has a babysitter who comes and stays with him when I take the other dogs. And he's super successful with staying with her for the weekend. She comes here to the house, but we make sure always that she is here when we leave. And then once she has been here when we leave, then he's fine to let her come and go.
Yeah.
But I would not put her in a situation where we left and then she showed up.
And so with her, do you also do the protocol every single time?
Every time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like you actually have a really good solution that works well for Marley. And you just got the reminder that you need to also stick to it with people Marley knows, but hasn't seen for a while. Yeah. Right.
And I do think there was some trigger stacking involved in that incident. We had been away and he had been with the babysitter all weekend. And we were also taking my mom's dog out of the house. So we had just put her in the crate. We had just gotten home, put that dog in the crate, and then Amy showed up. So adrenaline was a little high all around. He was excited to see us, and something we did not know at the time, but she is pregnant. And so there was also that addition of, this is my friend Amy, but she smells different.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, not an excuse.
No, but I mean, it's totally possible that made a difference as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we know, don't reach over Marley's head. He doesn't like it when I do it. And, I forget all the time because, we'll be in a training session and I'll be like, oh, yay. And you can see in the videos, he's just like, oh gosh, cringing away from me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. But, 98% of the time, he is the sweetest, wiggliest, happiest boy. And it breaks my heart that sometimes he isn't.
Yeah.
It's fairly predictable because I know what his trigger is, but I can't always predict other people.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah. As far as walking, we have always lived on property, like a larger piece of property. We're on 3 acres now, and that's really the smallest piece of property we've lived on. So I don't have to leash walk anybody, which is good and bad. I do think that if I lived somewhere where I had to walk more often, I might work on protocols with strangers more often. Here I don't. I tend not to. And then we just go out in public and and live with what we have. I've gotten better about that.
Yeah. So you're just not taking Marley out into the street, for example, is what you're saying. You just enjoy, he just gets to enjoy his 3 acres.
Right. Yeah. It's, our property line is fenced. So they, the dogs go out the door and they play and do their thing. And we walk around here, but we don't go on leash walks. And so that makes going to the park such a big deal, though.
Yeah.
It's not an everyday thing where he might get better over time. I don't know if he would or not. I don't know if it would be better or if it.
Yeah, you
He's
can't
a
know.
happy dog.
Yeah, and you can't know, and it doesn't really matter either because it's not necessary in your circumstances.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, if you have to take him to the vet, how do you deal with that?
He has a muzzle. We do muzzle training. And for the most part, he's good at the vet. We do the behaviors outside the door before we go in. I also schedule appointments when it's not super busy.
Nice. Yeah, that's good.
Or we have had an emergency vet visit, but I asked them if I could come in a back door, and that worked. He's really generally fine. Again, I can take him to kind of the competitions, and if he knows that there are lots of dogs there and he's on leash, he's excited, but he's good.
Yeah.
But it's when he's surprised or when someone in that group pops out and pets him. And I say at the vet, mostly he's good. He's been really good. We have a new vet. I love our vet clinic.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they felt the need to kiss him on his last visit. And he was so shocked he didn't have time to react. But the muzzle is the way we will go.
Yeah.
That's not a great idea.
That's when you're glad you got a muzzle on your dog. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. So, overall, he's fine. Now, I worry about doing the agility competitions. He's really pretty good at agility. And my agility coach has asked, why is he not competing? Why are you not doing these things? Like, well, because he knows you and you know him and you see Wiggly Marley. But if I take his leash off and he's stressed in the environment already and he zooms around and someone reaches for him, then I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, if you really wanted to, there's like the virtual agility league and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There always are other ways to compete without these stressors.
Yeah. And he's doing nose work because he has his first nose work competition this coming weekend.
Oh, nice.
But it's on leash and we're camping 2 nights ahead of time at the facility. So he will have time to adjust before he actually has to do anything.
And then there's just you and him in the area. So there won't be any surprises.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there will be a judge in there, but they're not likely to reach him.
That sounds perfect for him. Like that just sounds like it's such a natural fit because there's no point in putting him through a stressful environment that he doesn't want.
Right.
But very good. I'd like to hear how that goes.
Yeah, we went and practiced. We were there just before this started, and we went to a strange place with some strange people, and he walked in, did his thing, was awesome, and had lots of goodies. I am hopeful that will go well this weekend.
Good.
And he'll get to use his beagly nose.
That's right. His favorite thing. He does sometimes like to sniff like an extra minute before he tells me about things he's supposed to have found because, sniffing is fun. So we're finding a place for him. Yeah.
Very good.
That sounds really good. Yeah. Yeah. You'll have to tell us how it went after the weekend. One more thing, Amy, I wanted to ask you. So let's assume that our listener also has a dog who doesn't like to be touched by strangers, and maybe they don't have those 3 acres. Do you have 1 or 2 tips for them?
When I first started with Marley, I was not at all confident in advocating for him. I felt like everybody should be able to pet the dog when they ask. So I would have him out at the park and, somebody would be, oh, can I pet your dog? So I have a death grip on his head while they're trying to pet him. And it took me a really long time to get comfortable with saying, I'm sorry, no, he doesn't like that. Or, he's uncomfortable with that. That is one thing that I wish that I had done sooner. And remembering that I don't have to go to the park. He doesn't have to go to the park. If I'm going to take him on a leash walk, I can walk somewhere where it's not crowded, where there aren't a lot of people. So I kind of wish that I had caught on to that quicker.
Yeah.
That not every dog has to be petted, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, those are 2 really good points. So 1, advocate for your dog and their needs. And 2, just go places where they won't necessarily run into people. So you're avoiding the problem So Amy's point about that cultural pressure of allowing other people to touch your dog, and Peter's point about that myth that we are supposed to greet dogs by sticking our hands into their faces, those both tie into my experience and into the things that I, as a trainer, try to teach my clients who come to me with a dog like this. It's usually pet dog clients who come to me with these kinds of problems. So not sports people, not working dog owners, but just people who got a dog because they wanted a companion and they wanted to take that dog places, and somehow it's just not working out. So they come to me, and I usually take a 3-tiered approach. Very often, the moment or the time the people choose to come to me is after something has happened. So after the dog has bitten, for example. And now they're desperate. They feel that their dog is aggressive to people, doesn't like people, is scared of people, or doesn't like being touched. There's a couple labels in there that usually show up. And the first tier of my approach is to dissect these labels and replace them with better understanding on the owner's parts. My clients are usually embarrassed. They feel like dogs should accept being petted and greeted by anyone. That's basically what Amy originally felt like. So my clients who often feel like if their dog doesn't like to be petted, they themselves have failed somehow. Either they have failed their dog or they have failed their fellow human beings. In any case, feeling like a failure is a pretty bad feeling. So the first thing I want to do is I want to help my human client feel better. So, and that consists of helping people understand that by no means is it normal for a dog to want to be petted or touched by everyone, not by every acquaintance, and definitely not by most strangers, and not even by all friends. So we normalize this. Do you want to go around hugging strangers in the street and kissing distant acquaintances?
If every time you walked into a restaurant, everybody in the restaurant had to touch your hair, you maybe wouldn't go to that restaurant.
Exactly. And the same is true for your dog. And then I also like diving a bit into the reasons we ourselves as pet dog owners have such a strong reaction when our dogs don't want to let everyone at the restaurant touch their hair.
Is it because we feel that they're extensions of ourselves? And if I am a friendly person, so I want my dog to be an extension of myself and be a friendly dog?
Actually, that's a really good theory. I hadn't even thought of it that way, but you're probably right. That's probably also part of it, or sometimes part of it. My main theory, and I have no evidence for this whatsoever, it's just a theory, is that our need to allow other people to touch our dog stems from the way we, or at least our generations in Western cultures up until now have been socialized as children. It may be changing for the next generation. I've seen my friends talk critically about this, so there is hope. Anyway, so our generations, probably the ones who came before us as well, we've been taught to accept it when creepy Uncle Sebastian wants to hug us at a family gathering. Yeah. Or when Auntie Celine, who we don't even remember, wants to kiss us on the mouth and get their flowery, disgusting perfume all over us. And we're taught to tolerate it when Grandpa wants to tickle us, even at an age when it starts feeling like an intrusion into our personal space bubble. We are told not to make such a fuss about it. And I think part of the reason for this is that our parents, they themselves are trapped in this vicious circle of shame. They've been taught to tolerate this behavior from relatives when they were kids. And if they ever tried to stop a family member from hugging you when you were a kid, they may have been shamed by that family member. Being shamed is a really ugly experience. And interestingly, our human tendency is not to tell the shamer to shut up and fuck off. Instead, we turn around and shame our kids in return. And since they are the lowest ones on the totem pole, there's nothing they can do but take it, and they stop protesting. As children who have grown up having to tolerate this and normalizing tolerating touch by strangers and distant family members or acquaintances of our parents, we now perpetuate this vicious circle by wrapping our dogs up in it. We feel cultural shame when our dogs don't want to be touched. And we truly believe the solution is to make them tolerate it so that we can escape that shame circle. Interestingly, this does work for many dogs, but not for all of them. So as part of that first tier, I let my client know that their dog's reaction, whether it is to fight, to flee, or to freeze, is normal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's totally understandable. Most adult dogs are socially selective. They have a few friends, and those friends get to touch them. That is to say, most dogs don't like to be touched by anyone who's not in their inner circle. The same would be true for me as a human being, and maybe for Peter and Amy, for you too as well. There's a very small minority of dogs who really enjoys being touched by strangers, but that is the minority. Of the many dogs who don't enjoy it, the majority learn to tolerate it or freeze. And that usually looks like tolerating it or like enjoying it, unless you're really well versed in canine body language. So basically, they're learning the same thing that we learned when we were kids. We learned to just take it when we were being hugged or kissed, like soaked into someone's disgusting perfume. And
well, maybe that's why I love touching and hugging everybody when we meet. I always love that.
Well, I mean, I'm a hugger.
Well, it was
too.
funny with Leo, for example, the dog that brought me into the doggy world. It was so funny that he loved to be touched by strangers, and it was the cutest thing. Like if we meet someone, I would say "Dice hola, Leo," when he was ready. You could see when people were interested, and you could say "Dice hola," and he would just go in and rubbing his head up and getting it. It was nice. It made me feel nice. I really enjoyed watching it because you just get the smiles and
yeah.
and you walk away going, oh, you're such a good boy,
Yeah.
And I can understand that almost I would need to be careful not to let him say hello to people who didn't want, because not everybody wants to say hello to dogs either,
Yeah.
A dog that doesn't want to say hello, half the people in the world are pretty pleased with that type of dog.
Yeah.
And they don't want to touch it. It's looking at the dog and seeing, reading the dog, does the dog want to be touched, and presume it doesn't want to be first.
Yeah, exactly. So your dog is one of the minority there. Like Leo was a minority dog because most dogs don't like that, but he did. And I agree, it's a wonderful feeling to have that minority dog. We want all dogs to be like that, but
be like that.
Not all of them are.
And I think part of it is we have such strong feelings for our dogs that we want everybody to love them. We want people to see how amazing they are. I think probably we push them a little bit when we shouldn't to accept those strangers because we want everybody to know how amazing they are.
Yeah.
But that definitely, backfires in the case with dogs that don't like that. But until you know that they don't like that, I think that that's part of what happens. None of my 5 dogs like to be petted by strangers. Marley's the only one that tells them that he doesn't, that communicates clearly. The others communicate, but not everybody sees it.
Right. And that's the thing, until you've had a dog who communicated this clearly, you're often not aware of the fact that most dogs don't like it. Yeah. But it is the best experience to have a dog who loves that. Like just the other day, I was driving and there was a toll booth. I'm not sure what it is like in the US, but here there are these toll booths and you stop and you pay in cash on certain highways. So I handed her my money, and the toll booth person looked into my car and stared at Game and commented on my co-pilot. And and Game doesn't mind if someone stares at her and she's in a car. So it was such a nice moment for me. It made me smile because she noticed my dog and she thought the dog was cool. And she smiled because she, I guess, likes seeing dogs in cars. And I drove away just smiling and feeling good. And then I thought back to Grit, my previous Malinois. She didn't even like being looked at by strangers. So yeah, it would have been such an entirely different experience both for me and for the toll booth lady, because I would have told the toll booth lady to just not look at my dog, please, because my dog would already be drooling and thinking about ways to bite off her head by just being looked at, right? And with Game, it's just such a nice, relaxing experience, and everyone's happy. Yeah. But Amy, you just made a really good point about none of your 5 dogs likes to be touched, but 4 of them tolerate it. So people don't know. So they probably just learned to freeze or to just get it over with. And then there is a small minority of dogs within that large majority of dogs who don't like to be touched by strangers, who don't tolerate it. So those are dogs like Marley. They fight, they flee, or they start shaking. And these are the dogs my clients bring in. The first thing I teach my clients is, or I try to teach them, is the confidence to say no and to stop anyone who wants to touch the dog. Because this will, not only will this avoid accidents, it will also improve your relationship with your dog. And it's not only okay, it's a good thing to be a dog's advocate.
I usually mutter under my breath, don't touch my dog. And I just got into a habit, even with Leo, who liked to be touched. Or the clicking or right into the face. I wouldn't say it loud enough to the ear, but I would always don't. And then it graduated to, don't talk to my effing dog. It might have, not so they could hear it, but I would be again just aware of keeping close, because if they're not close to you, you don't know what somebody's gonna do. And what they think is okay.
Yeah, and you have no control the further away there.
Other people and what they think is okay. It's shocking what some people think is okay.
Yeah, like the kissing at the vet. I mean,
kissing at the vet.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I haven't had that experience at the vet's office, but when I lived, well, I guess I still live in Guanajuato, theoretically. When I lived at the center of Guanajuato, there was this once a week language exchange for Spanish speakers and English speakers, and you take turns, 20 minutes English, 20 minutes Spanish. It was at the rooftop terrace of this bar, and I brought Game once, and this this person who didn't know Game was like, "Oh my God, a dog!" and like came down and kissed her on the head. And I mean, Game is like the most relaxed Malinois I've met in my entire life. Like, she didn't enjoy it, but she's like, whatever, humans, stupid. But again, I'm like thinking, Jesus Christ. before I even had a chance to react, right? She's just like coming and flying in there. If that had been any other dog, and they might have been startled and reacted very differently. Yeah, it's really hard. So if you have a dog who is not relaxed with these kinds of things, that's just not a dog to take to these kinds of places.
Yeah, I think we have a little advantage with the reputation of Chihuahuas. Whenever we take Inanna out, people are, if you've got her in the hand, people, I think just the reputation of a Chihuahua culturally is a wee bit like, you might not want to put your finger directly into their mouth.
Yeah.
Because they've been in cartoons as angry little animals. So I think that sort of helps with that. If you're holding a little dog, I think people. But then I've seen people put their hands into babies' faces. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's really hard. Marley is super cute. He's got little speckled ears. He's got one black eye. Yeah,
for the children.
Yeah. They're like, everybody thinks cute, and because he's cute, he should be sweet. And
the cuter, I feel like the problem is the cuter the dog, the harder it is for you as an owner to advocate for them. Yeah, with my dog, Game is a Malinois, and most people do not react like this person at the language exchange. Like, most people recognize that this dog looks like a police dog or a military dog, so maybe I just shouldn't touch it. Yeah. And I see such a huge difference because Phoebe, my standard poodle, was very cute. Curly hair, very bouncy, always cheerful and very happy, but also very human social. So that wasn't a problem for her, luckily. And she still is. She just doesn't live with me. She lives with my ex. I see such a big difference in how many people want to approach Game versus wanted to approach Phoebe, because Game just isn't as cute. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Leo was a pointer, and which is basically what everyone thought of here as a Dalmatian. So it just, all the kids were like, Pongo. I mean, I've seen a child go up, a little child, like, barely walking, and just take each of the two ears and put nose to nose.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is a 60-pound dog, But luckily, Leo would have just lapped it up. The only danger you would have got would have been a big sloppy kiss. and that'll wash off.
That's also funny though, because I don't think I've ever seen a Dalmatian in Guatemala. So maybe so it makes sense that people would think pointers are Dalmatians, right?
Oh, it was just, I would just give up. I wouldn't even bother. I didn't correct anybody, and once a month, well, maybe once a week, you would get someone who would say, it's a pointer. So I would say, oh, you get the daily pointer prize. You know what this is. But I was, you can't say to a child who's going, oh my God. And a girl said, walking down Santander, and she says, oh my God, I've never seen a Dalmatian in real life. And I was thinking, you still have never seen a Dalmatian in real life. But I didn't bother telling her. I said, oh yeah, here he is, Pongo.
Well,
the other 100 I've lost.
That child probably felt very lucky and very happy, and still telling all her friends.
Well, that child was 22 years old by the looks of it.
Oh.
But I didn't want to spoil anybody's fun, really. Why not? Yes, he's a Dalmatian.
Yeah. Why not?
The Chihuahua is sort of unmistakable, and whenever she's on her lead, people will know to stay clear, won't they? Yeah. And she's very good at the verbals. It's a little low. It starts as a low growl in the neck, and as soon as the little warning goes, just whatever you're doing, stop doing it.
Yeah. And people usually heed her warning?
Absolutely.
Okay,
people will back away, and then you make a joke about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's not aggressive in any way. And any of the little bites that I've had, I wouldn't call them bites. They were just more slaps. Get away from me. Stop doing that. And if I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, then that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Listen to her.
Listen to your dog. Yeah.
She just gave me a little growl just that wee second because she didn't like how I was rubbing it. So, well, hands up.
Now you know. So to help people understand, to advocate for their dogs, one thing I tell them is they're living with their dogs 24/7, and they may never see the stranger again, or they may see the family member who wants to pet their dog once a year at a family event. So obviously the relationship with your dog takes precedence. It's the more important one because you live with your dog and not with Uncle Bob who wants to pat your beautiful dog's head. So just put things into perspective a little bit. Yeah, and then there's a number of concrete strategies I teach people for how to be their dog's advocate. That alone would fill an entire podcast, so we'll save that for another day. And the second tier is what Peter alluded to earlier, that we are so prone to sticking our hands into dogs' faces. I really think that's a primate thing. I've seen this on 3 continents. It's an incredibly sticky story. People who have dogs and have had dogs all their lives teach their kids this is the right way to greet them. And my theory for that is that we as primates, we do everything with our hands. We explore the world with our hands. We show affection with our hands. We greet each other politely with our hands, at least in many Western cultures. And this opposable thumb-related primate behavior is even more deeply rooted than the cultural rule that dogs and children and even adults have to tolerate everyone's touch. I think it's rooted on the level of our very species. It just feels natural to us to use our hands to greet our fellow humans as well as dogs. So we shake hands, we give high fives, we do fist bumps, and we stick our hands into the face of unfamiliar dogs. The problem here is that dogs are not primates. Dogs are canines, and canines don't use their paws or their front legs to explore the world or to communicate. They use their mouths and their nose or other body language. And if you've ever seen 2 unfamiliar off-leash dogs greet each other, you'll see them circle each other without touching each other. So they get a sense of smell, or they may just curve around each other with a polite wag and then move on with their day. If they do decide to get to know each other better, there's usually some butt sniffing. And if this goes well too, they may start playing. And only at this level, there may be physical contact between them. And even that, not necessarily. And even at this level, nobody is sticking their paw into the face of the other one. So from a canid point of view, being approached frontally and having someone stick their hand or their paw right into your face is simply rude. But dogs have been socialized by humans and they have co-evolved with us. So most of them will tolerate our rude behavior, even if they wouldn't tolerate it from another dog. They are aware that we are not dogs, we're humans, and humans are just a little clumsy when it comes to introductions. That's why they will usually tolerate our hand-in-face greeting, not because they approve, but because they know we're idiots.
The other thing, I think that people love touching their own dogs. Their dogs love being touched by the people. So the people think, I want to touch another dog. They will like that as well, which is a natural thing. I mean, I like touching my dog right now. She likes it, and another dog likes being touched by their owner. So what if I touch it, then 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
But for a dog, it's not as simple as that, because they like being touched by their owner.
Yeah, or we just assume because our own dog likes to be touched by us. All dogs like to be touched by us.
By us.
Yeah. Well, moving on to my third tier, the last one. So once my client has understood these subtleties and is gaining the confidence to stand up and protect their dog, we get to the training or management part of the equation. That is not necessarily the case at all times. So for example, with someone like Amy, the first 2 tiers would be all you need because you have 3 acres and you can just simply avoid certain situations. And a little bit of muscle training goes a long way for vet visits and stuff like that. You don't need to walk through the very center of town, or you don't need to walk your dog on Times Square, but not everyone has that luxury. And if the dog's current behavior in the face of strangers is dangerous or significantly impacts the life quality of the dog or the owner or others around them, then we need to teach the dog an alternative response to being in the proximity of strangers. And there are various ways of doing this, but all of them involve trust. Which way I choose will usually depend on the dog and owner team and on their living circumstances. It could be building leadership skills on the part of the human. It could be simple counter conditioning for the dog, or it could be control unleashed games that give the dog back some agency over their own lives rather than making them feel powerless. And this too deserves its very own podcast episode, and I'll do one in the future, I promise. But basically, Control Unleashed is meant to give the dog a familiar structure. And within that structure, they will be able to feel safe around strangers. And this increases the dog's resilience. So Control Unleashed is a program developed by the one and only Leslie McDevitt. I'll tell you more about it in the future, but you can join the Friends of Control Unleashed group on Facebook to learn more, or you can reach out to me or to Julie Daniels for privates. Note that I'm currently in the process of becoming a certified Control Unleashed instructor, but Julie already is one and she's brilliant. I'm not sure she's taking privates at the moment, but she may be doing remote consults. In any case, I'll leave all the relevant links for you in the show notes. Okay, so I'm getting off my soapbox now. Thank you, Amy and Peter, for having this conversation with me.
Very nice to be here.
Yeah. Would you like to add something, a key takeaway from today's storytelling? Amy?
Be nice to your dogs.
Be nice to your dogs. Yes.
I don't have a key point, but my brain is clicking. After your second tier, I was thinking that Marley is also not good with dog-on-dog greetings. He missed all that socialization early. And so we have to do special introductions with dogs, although he gets along fine with everybody once he's been introduced. So he lacks the skills with both humans and dogs in how to do those initial interactions. I don't know what that means, but it's
interesting.
It's making me think more, about what he needs and why. We never know why, but he might actually put a paw in somebody's face. He doesn't know how to do that with a dog. So, how to greet. Yeah. He doesn't circle. He doesn't sniff.
He missed out on that sensitive socialization period around other dogs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's when you learn these things. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder if the human and dog introductions are related in some way in his brain, and he's just missing all of that.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I personally don't think it is necessarily related, human socialization and dog socialization. But for some dogs, it may be, maybe even if only because if you don't get socialized to dogs, or if you don't get socialized to humans, you may also be less likely to get good socialization with other dogs. So this has been the case for dogs like Marley. I'm assuming this may be a correlation that just happens to often go hand in hand, but who knows? We should all think about this some more. Yeah.
That'll be the homework
Yeah.
assignment.
Homework assignment. Well, so thank you, Peter and Amy.
How do you say goodbye to dogs?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's another podcast altogether. Well, I know how humans say goodbye, though.
All done.
All done. Well, it was very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
Virtually.
Thank you for being our very first guest on this podcast, Amy. This was awesome. And I'm really, really grateful that you said yes, that I could talk you into hopping on with us here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to our listener for tuning in. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with a yet to be determined topic. Bye.
Adios.